Yeah, welcome to Bergen Outlook. My name is Yoel Weisshaus. Today our guest is Milton Allimadi of the Black Star News. Welcome, Milton. Milton is
Thank you.
the editor-in-chief of the Black Star News, and he's a former uh, contributor to the New York Times, and the author and publisher of the book of the Hearts of Darkness. Right? Welcome to the show,
Thank
Bergen
you.
Outlook.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you, Milton. Would you like to introduce yourself a little bit to the audience?
Sure.
And maybe we can.
Yes, of course. I live in Manhattan. I've been publishing the Black Star for about 17 years now. I was born in Uganda. I grew up in East Africa for some years. And then I went to college here in the United States. I went to Syracuse. And then I went to Columbia Journalism to study journalism. And one of the main reasons why I decided to publish the Black Star News is because I find that sometimes in the corporate media, you really don't get the other side of the story.
Right. I remember when you started publishing the Black Star News, but what is interesting is what did you find is the most core of the issues that attracts your readers to the Black Star News? Why is your newspaper distinguished than other newspapers in the media?
Well, first of all, I think if somebody is conscious and very interested in the truth and in the news, they should be very suspicious when they see that all the newspapers seem to have the same story and the same perspective. That alone should tell you that something is wrong.
So speaking of that,
You know?
you have been covering a lot the situation currently ongoing in Libya.
Yes.
And from my understanding, that when I read the literature of the Defense Department, that Libya is the first country, the first state that the U.S. has officially experimented their army strength on African soil. And how do you relate to this issue of Libya and Africa in general?
Well, first of all, I think the story in Libya, I think the way most of the media told us was a bit too simplistic. That we are going there to rescue people being massacred by Gaddafi. And that was the simple story. But beyond that, we really didn't know who were these so-called rebels in Libya. And we only got one side of the story. Did everybody in Libya support the rebels? And if so, why was there a need for intervention from outside, from these powerful armies of NATO?
Right.
If the government was that unpopular, why was it not like in Tunisia, where the people themselves were able to rise up and
where
throw
the
out?
legitimacy fell apart
Exactly.
within its own.
And the same thing in Egypt.
Right.
So that alone should make you want to ask more questions, which I think is what we did in the Black Star News. And we asked questions, for example, if the government is so unpopular, why is it still able to stand 8 or 9 months later after the NATO bombardment started? Those are the kind of questions.
And the killing of Gaddafi.
And the killing, right.
Yeah.
Those are the kind of questions that people that are interested in serious news should always be willing to ask. Don't only accept the one-sided view just because it's coming from CNN or the New York Times.
Right.
And we raised other serious questions. For example, when it was officially announced that the United States was supporting the operation to go into Libya, we were told that the United Nations Resolution 1973 was to protect innocent civilians from the civil war, whether they're being armed by both sides. But that was never the case.
Talking about that, the revolution in Libya, but however, if you want to call it a revolution, I call it, or some call it an insurgency.
Right.
Started on February 17, if I'm correct.
Right.
And you were in Libya
I was
when?
in
January?
Libya in early January, and it was almost like a surreal evolution to me, because when I was there, the country was, obviously peaceful. And if you come to the country, one of the things that you notice the most is the construction, the buildings, the roads. Very impressive. The government put in billions of dollars.
But when you were in Libya, what did you see people when you talk to people? Did people feel angry about Gaddafi, or did they feel good about him, or if life was normal? How did you see the atmosphere?
Well, I was in Tripoli, and as the history now shows, in Tripoli he's actually popular. A few months ago, even during the middle of the bombing, 1 million people came out to the streets to show their opposition to NATO, if you recall. But obviously in Benghazi, that's where the insurgency started. And he's not popular in Benghazi because that's where the King Idris, used to come from. And Gaddafi overthrew the king in 1969. So he's never been popular in Benghazi.
What do you think did the Benghazians, beside that, was there any other reasons that they didn't like about Gaddafi?
Yes, primarily there are two reasons, I think. One was many years ago, there was a massacre in a prison, I think it's called Abu Salim, in Tripoli, where many of the prisoners are people that came from Benghazi, and they were suspected.
Let's hold it on to that. We are coming on right now on a break. We will be right back with you. Thank you for tuning in with us at Bergen Outlook. I'm Yoel Weisshaus. Welcome back to Bergen Outlook. Our guest today is Milton Allimadi. The topic we're discussing is the situation in Africa and Libya especially.
Right.
And I'd like to turn this conversation a little bit towards Africa in general. How Uganda has also had its own set of problems, and as you said, you are from Uganda.
Yes.
During your visit in Africa this January, did you visit Uganda?
No, I did not. In fact, I've not been able to visit Uganda for quite some time now, and it's primarily because of what I write in my publication. We expose government corruption. One of the big stories right now in Uganda is Uganda found a lot of oil in the last 4 or 5 years, about 3 billion barrels. So many of the oil companies are now interested in the oil, and reportedly 2 companies, Tullow Oil, which is a British company, and ENI, which is Italian, reportedly they've paid millions of dollars in bribes to Ugandan ministers, officials, to try to get access to this oil. There's a big discussion in Parliament now. They're asking for these ministers to resign. The Prime Minister, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and the Minister of Internal Affairs. He used to be the Energy Minister, and supposedly they got a total of $25 million. So these are the things we write about in the Black Star News, and obviously I'm not welcome to Uganda.
Yeah, some have said that the reason Libya, this rebellions against Gaddafi was so significant now is because his own ministers resigned and contested the leadership of Gaddafi.
Right.
But at the same time, so the Gaddafi side has accused these ministers of taking bribes from the West, and similar to what you're talking about Uganda, just so they can get oil and different things. Have you come across any information about that or through your research of journalism?
No, not really, but I would suspect that if you were a minister in Gaddafi's government and you see the bombs are about to start coming, and you see how, for example, when the U.S. went into Iraq, what happened to former officials in Saddam Hussein's regime, I'm sure you could take that as a lesson of history, as an example, and you would not need much encouragement to start leaving Gaddafi. I think they saw something that they thought would be a sinking ship, because they knew that there was no way they would be able to survive the full weight of NATO attack. At the end of the day, they knew the government would go out, so they were just cutting their personal deals. But one point that we need to look at, people that are really serious and objective, they can do their own research. Go online. I like to tell people, do your own research. Google. There's a lot of information out there. You'll find that, for example, Resolution 1970.
1972.
1970. No, there were two resolutions.
Oh,
1973 was to prevent harm from coming to civilians. Right. That was hypocritical, because the NATO Air Force actually took sides in the Civil War. It was not supposed to, according to the resolution. But they became like the Air Force of the insurgents.
Became an ally.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then number two, Resolution 1970 barred the shipment of arms to Libya. But France violated that resolution by actually dropping arms to Western Libya. And Qatar also violated that resolution. According to the Wall Street Journal, flew in about 18 cargo shipments of weapons to Benghazi and then gave it out to the militias that it supported. So you find out that the people that were supposed to be holding international law were actually the ones that were breaking it in the Libya situation. And two other points that I think is important, that people that are serious and can do their own research. The atrocities, the most atrocities were actually committed by the NATO-supported insurgents. And people can read two very significant articles in the Wall Street Journal. One was June 21, and the other one was September 13. And in these articles—
Can you tell us a little bit about the articles?
The one on June 21 reported the massacre in the city of Misrata, where they said that there was a very racial component to it. In Misrata, the light-skinned Libyans were searching for darker-skinned Libyans to eliminate. And that in one part of the city, which the population was 4/5 black Libyans, the entire population was driven wiped out from. And the name, what was most disturbing, was the name of the brigade that was committing that crime was called the Brigade for Purging Slaves, Black Skin. And this is what you call, this meets all the definition of war crime.
Of genocide.
Genocide. But only the Wall Street Journal wrote a major story about that. It was ignored by the New York Times. It was ignored by CNN. So we wrote many editorials questioning why this was being ignored by the New York Times. And we also put the phone number, 212-556-1234 of the New York Times. And we urged our readers to call and ask the foreign editor of the New York Times, Joe Kahn, why are you not writing about this? And we think it yielded some fruit, because about 3 weeks later, they did their article. It was not as good as the Wall Street Journal's, but at least
it covered the meat.
Exactly. And then the second article of September 13, it covered about the city of Tawaga, which had a population of about 35,000, and was all predominantly black Libyans in that city. The entire population was emptied from that city, and their homes were burnt down, and on the walls they wrote the words slaves and Negroes. These are the NATO-supported insurgents. Now,
so you believe that the West is supporting genocide of African people, of black people, just because of their skin color?
I think they supported insurgents who committed that crime. Did they know that these are the crimes that might have been committed before they started supporting that? That's difficult to say. That's almost like guessing. But the fact of the matter is that the crimes occurred and they were not highlighted because, I think, because of this reason. Because it was the side we were supporting.
We're coming up on a break now. Hold on to
Okay.
that. This is Yoel Weisshaus with Bergen Outlook. Please bear with us. We'll be right back with you. Welcome back to Bergen Outlook. This is Yoel Weisshaus with our guest, Milton Allimadi.
Thank you.
And we're discussing the situation now in Africa and Libya especially, and we are discussing how the West has manipulated the situation towards their agenda. Now, Milton, as I understand, you find it that there is an impossibility. You probably purposely prevented by some to express your findings in journalism or your reports that you're coming across or your highlights.
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit about it? What was your experience?
Well, first of all, I think at some point we saw that traffic was going up on our website. So we felt people believed that we were bringing out and highlighting information that the so-called mainstream media wanted to avoid. Because clearly, if you go back and you do the research, most of the mainstream media also took sides in the Civil War.
Which is not something in journalism you do.
Absolutely. And make it so clearly taking sides and calling these guys like the liberators, and when in fact the evidence was clearly there along the way that they were committing
genocide,
serious crimes along the way, including slitting the throats of suspects, that the people they suspected supported the government, and yet they downplayed and ignored all this. And so you can't be surprised now that eventually when they caught Gaddafi, they killed him the way they'd been killing people along the way. And then they also supposedly tied the hands of 53 former officials and also executed them. So why are we surprised now? But to go back to your question. When we wrote the editorials urging readers to call the New York Times,
and the Wall Street Journal.
And we highlighted the articles that the Wall Street Journal did, which were actually very good.
Right.
At one point, we could not get on our website for 3 days. And we kept calling our host company. We said, what's going on? And they gave us the answers that did not sound credible. Then after the third day, I said, no, I don't believe you guys anymore. You can't convince me that other websites that also write news that you host also can't get on their website. I think there's something going on. That was at 4 a.m. that I called, and I spoke with the supervisor and, of course, wrote down all the notes clearly. And then at noon the following day, I could get on the website. I got on finally. And then guess what? Obviously you get on and you want to look what's going on.
If everything is intact.
If everything is intact. The article that I just told you about, urging readers to call the New York Times and ask them why they're not focusing on this ethnic cleansing of black Libyans, that article had been deleted. So, but the good thing, I had already posted a link to the article on my Facebook page, and many other websites had published the entire article. So when you go to my Facebook page and you click on the link, it takes you to my website, blackstarnews.com, and on that spot was a blank space where the article was supposed to be. So now we knew that somebody had an interest.
From the New York Times.
Well, we're not naming names yet because we said at this point you need legal representation.
Right.
So we got in touch with a lawyer, and the lawyer is now trying to get to the bottom of this. But this is a very disturbing instance of censorship. You know, we're supposed to live in a society of
freedom of speech is respected.
Freedom of information, and especially you would expect that a newspaper would not be subjected to this kind of manipulation. But this is what happened, and it's chilling and it's scary, so we want to get to the bottom of this. So it does show you that there is some vested interest who would like the story in Libya to be kept very limited and not to get a bigger picture.
Yeah, no, it is quite interesting that that this whole situation is taking place in that format, because when reading these newspapers, you see a very narrow view. You can't get what is their position, or what did they say?
Right.
So it's quite an interesting topic that you brought up, and we really appreciate you, Milton Allimadi, for coming into the studio. I wish there was more time, but we have run out of time.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much, Milton Allimadi, Black Star News, the author and publisher of the
Hearts of Darkness.
The Hearts of Darkness. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Please.